Welcome back after a short summer break. Today, finally, I bring you a new painting video. I continue painting my Targaryen's army for the A Song of Ice and Fire game, and today I would like to show you the process how I have painted one of my dragons. We are gonna paint today the Rhaegal model from the Mother of the Dragon box. But before we start painting, let me mention the Realms of Battle Europe event which I have attended recently. It was the biggest A Song of Ice and Fire event with more than 200 players, with painting competition included, where I was lucky to win the prize in the large model category. What is more, my second game on Table 1 has been streamed online by Hidden Crits, so go ahead and check out their Game of Thrones content. Today's dragon secured me the trophy, so let's have a look how my battle-ready Targaryens have been painted. Mother of the Dragon box contains 3 dragons, Rhaegal, Viserion and Drogon. And of course the Daenerys Targaryen herself. Today we will be painting Rhaegal, but I have already finished the Drogon and Daenerys before, and you can see here, as well as on my social media, how do they look like. I started as usual with the GW Chaos Black undercoat. After some research where I have looked for some pics of the dragon from Games of Thrones series, I decided to go for the green and turquoise palette to make the model eye-catching on the table. My first base tone was the Arachnid green from GSW. I use it very often on my miniatures as it has a very interesting dark greyish and greenish tone. I have added a few drops of airbrush thinner from Vallejo and I started airbrushing, keeping the zenithal direction. At this stage I just want to bring a base tone to the model without much attention, keeping some shadows in lower areas. I highly recommend using an airbrush for such models as it helps us to work much faster and the paint is applied much smoother than with the brush. As you can see, this tone looks very interesting, dark grey with some blue and green tint, which can be combined with many other colors to get some more different variations. Now I will bring the emerald paint from Vallejo. I will repeat the procedure and again using an airbrush I will highlight the model from above. I mainly focus here on the dragon's head and upper parts of the wings. You know what? My idea basically is to bring some light and vibrant colors, to create smooth blends with an airbrush and in the end to blend it all together with the oil paints. So keep on watching and we will get to that point soon. I already like the turquoise color, but I want to add some greens as well. This is why I decided to go for an unusual color, mostly used in the historical games, which is the German camouflage bright green. This time I have added a little more airbrush thinner to obtain the consistency of milk. I want to use it as a filter with the direction coming from below. This might not look perfect at this stage, but as many painters always repeat, trust the process and keep on painting. With those extra tones the final effect will be even more interesting. Well, I hope so. I'm painting it without a bigger plan, I just have some milestones behind my head I want to reach, but the final palette or details are still not set. This is why I like painting the army pieces with the tabletop standard, where every extras bring the model to another level. In this case I want to push the highlights further and to bring back again the turquoise color as dominant. To do that I mix the emerald paint and vanilla drop from Greenstuff World, a really nice light yellow tone, which will work great to achieve the lighter tone of the emerald paint. As you can see I mix them in a ratio around 3:1, and after adding a few drops of the airbrush thinner, I start building on the highlights. Again I focus here on the upper side of the model, keeping one zenithal direction of the light. As I wasn't convinced to the green color at the beginning, now we can see that all those colors start to blend quite nicely, and I really like the contrast between the shadows and highlights. Vanilla drop paint has a nice, warm and saturated tone, this is why this mix looks really vibrant and very interesting in my opinion, of course. So far so good, the effect starts to look convincing, however, from the tabletop perspective, I like when my models have stronger contrast, what helps them to stand out on the table. Due to that fact, I decided to push the highlight once more, this time by adding a pure white paint to the previous mix. You can already see how colder the tone gets. I have selected only a limited areas where I apply those last highlights and I try to gently apply the paint there. And when it comes to the blue tones, I think we are done at this stage. While watching the Game of Thrones or checking the images of Rhaegal, I noticed that the ends of the wings have different reddish tone. I decided to implement that on my model as well. I began with the Carnage Red from GSW and I started working gently on the wings, applying the paint from below. Only by adding that color, the wings became already more interesting. I was wondering about using the brown color for it, like snakebite leather or something, but in the end I wanted to have some red tones there as well. And the Carnage Red has it for sure. I wanted to make the wings membrane to look a little bit more like a flesh, so I have mixed the Carnage Red with the peach flesh, also from GSW, and I proceeded with applying it in the middle section of each wing membrane. We have already created a nice gradient of colors which work really well together. You can see the color wheel and the paints used here are more or less on the opposite sides of the wheel, what is something I have aimed for. As the last step of setting the base colors, I have used the pure peach flesh to apply it again on the wings membrane, as a final highlight. The colors are now all set, but the model lacks some definition. So it is time for the oil paints. I'm going to use a straightforward oil wash, which will be the mix of the black and viridian paints and the white spirit to dilute it heavily. This step will change the definition of the model completely. Let's have a look. You can see that I'm preparing both paints separately on my palette and I mix them in the other place. Thanks to that I can control the tone I want to achieve. But there is one very important and crucial step you have to remember. Before applying the oil wash, you need to seal the model with the varnish, in the best case the gloss varnish. I like using the satin varnish for that as well. I have closed my eyes and slapped the whole model with the oils. Joke aside, but honestly this step looks exactly like that. I have covered all areas with a wash and it is clearly visible how it toned down the colors. Sure, this could be made more carefully using pin washes, but let's remember this is a gaming piece and I'm looking for a quick and effective result. After applying the oils, it is recommended to wait for some time to let them dry properly. I have used the hairdryer to speed it up. Eventually, after half an hour, I started to clean the dragon. As you can see, I'm using the makeup sponge with the drop of white spirit to remove the oils. But be gentle, don't haste, we don't want to remove the paint below the oils. Sure, the varnish protects it, but you never know. I'm trying to keep the oils in the recesses so that the model gets its definition. We had an airbrush phase, we had an oil phase, now it is time for the brush work. But before we will go into details, I want to paint the base. Such models which are permanently connected to the base or terrain might be tricky, and I don't want to ruin the final effect while painting the rocks. For all my Targaryens, the base color is the quicksand brown from GSW. I want to keep my army consistent, so it will be no exception in this case. I have tried to cover all the rocks carefully with already mentioned base color. A quick highlight with the mix of the quicksand brown and khaki bone should be enough. We could highlight the rocks with the brush, but I was in a hurry before the tournament, so I made some shortcuts with an airbrush. Highlighting will be followed by the washes. I have used here the dipping inks diluted heavily with the master medium again from GSW. As you can expect, I have covered the rocks with trying to gather the most of the inks in the shadows. When the inks are dry, I use the old good dry brush technique with the mix of the English Field Brown and khaki bone to highlight the rocks. Now with the base almost ready, I can finally focus on the details of the dragon. The first part I want to paint are all the claws, teeth and bones. I often paint such elements with similar colors, and as a base tone I usually use the dark umber. I'm going to cover all those elements in one go, which will be followed by adding the khaki bone to the mix. I like to prepare on my wet palette the gradient of colors I am currently using, to have a possibility to switch between highlights and shadows, glazing the transitions and smoothing it out. Here you can see that the mix of the brown and bone colors is my mid-tone, and the pure khaki bone is the final highlight color. So, as you can see, we are now on the stage where most of the details are already painted. I don't think it is necessary to present the painting process of all of them, it is rather clear. However, I would like to present you how I added some texture on the wings and what I have done with the scales. Adding a simple texture to our miniatures can make a great difference how the model will look like in the end, especially when you have some large flat surfaces. In this case, I decided to paint some tiny dots on the wings membrane with the mix of peach flesh and banana split. Have a look how it looks like and how impactful it is, especially for a gaming piece. And the last but probably the most important stage, painting the scales. This might be quite challenging, but I have painted most of the scales individually, using the mix of the emerald and white mix. This step brings the model to its final form, with proper colors, definition and contrast. It was definitely worth spending some extra time for this, as it made a huge difference. Have a look how the final effect looks like and share in the comments what do you think about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video and it will be useful for you. If you want to see more painting content, don't forget to subscribe the channel, and if you want to check out more my painting tutorials, please have a look at my Patreon page. See you, bye!